Hey guys, Clayton here. Sorry I didn't have time to record myself, so you just have to stick with my voice in front of the still image that I've done. Anyway, 2019 is finally over, and we are now in the new decade of 2020. And much like every year, 2019 was actually not a bad year for movies. We've had our fair share of good, and we also had our fair share of bad. And with this video in particular, we're going to take a look at the movies that I didn't think were that good, just to get the negativity out of the way. Now, like every year prior, I didn't see every movie that has come out this year. Didn't see Cats, Playmobil the Movie, Arctic Dogs, Hellboy, among many others. Plus, if you like the movies that I have here, that's totally fine. It doesn't make you an idiot, doesn't make you wrong, doesn't make you below me. We're all different in our opinions in movies. And also, I don't really have that much in terms of dishonorable mentions. If anything, there are movies that I just thought were just meh. Movies that I thought were kind of in the middle. Movies like Little, Pet Sematary, Annabelle Comes Home, and The Curse of La Llorona. The latter of which I only saw because Linda Cardellini is in it, and, well, Linda Cardellini is bae. So, let's get this out of the way and get it over with. This is the top 7 worst movies of 2019. Number 7. The Fanatic. Directed by Limp Bizkit's Fred Durst. No, seriously, he directed this. From the premise in the trailer alone, this looks like it could be like a modern day version of something like Misery. And it is, if it was made by Tommy Wiseau. Which is why this movie is so low on the list. It's one of the most hilariously awful, so bad it's good movies to come out in recent memory. And it's all hindered by an odd and outright ridiculousness of the script, like scenes that are meant to be somewhat dramatic or even tension-filled come out kind of silly, and it's actually kind of funny. And John Travolta's performance. As over the top and exaggerated as he is doing the best with the material given to him. I mean, as bad as this movie is, I am almost recommending it, especially with some friends for a bad movie night. Grab some drinks and some pizza, and I'm sure you'll have the next Room or Birdemic. And as far as bad John Travolta movies of the decade go, it's at least more entertaining and memorable than something like Gotti. Number 6. Ugly Dolls. Now, I don't want to be too hard on this movie because for what it does, its heart's in the right place with the message of being unique. The animation is actually good and kind of cute, and some of the songs are a bit catchy. Unfortunately, this is a very safe and very by the numbers anime movie that feels like a dire version of something like Trolls. With a predictable story, dull characters, and while I felt some of the songs were kind of catchy, they are for the most part very bland and try too hard to be the next big hit to play on the radio. And as much as I don't like to declare movies as such, but this does come off very soulless and made to promote the dolls they're based on. It's a forgettable movie, but not bad enough to denounce newer anime movies as being terrible now. I mean, you have to be pretty woolly to think of something like that. Number 5. The Gallows Act 2. So there's good news and bad news. The good news is that it's slightly better than the first movie, but the bad news is it's still not good. It has similar issues to the first, where it has an interesting premise but a poorly done execution, where it's basically just a better version of the Slender Man movie from last year, and it relies mostly on jump scares. The acting isn't as good either, but the one thing edge it does have over the first is that the main character is a million times more likable than the camera guy in the first movie, even if she can be a bit annoying at times. And then there's the ending, which not only did they try to force a character from the first to be in it, but it seemed like they tried to top how ridiculous the twist from the first movie was with something that is equally so. In terms of sequels to found footage movies that aren't found footage, it is better than something like Blair Witch 2 and The Last Exorcism Part 2, but it's still not worth recommending. Number 4. Dark Phoenix, or X-Men Dark Phoenix. Fox's X-Men franchise comes to its conclusion not with a bang, but unfortunately with a whimper. They tried to do the Dark Phoenix storyline again after X-Men The Last Stand didn't go over so well, but unlike that movie where at least there was some reason to care for the characters, this movie, however, it gave me very little reason to care because this movie was so dull. I didn't really care what happens to them after Jean Grey gets affected by the cosmic rays. Not only that, but the villains were some of the weakest in the entire series, and the action scenes, unlike some of the others where they were actually very creative, this one comes off very uninspired. The only good things I can name are some of the actors doing a good job, especially Sophie Turner, the Hans Zimmer score, and the illustrated poster by Stephen Chornay. That's practically it. This movie's so forgettable and dull that everything else is just forgettable. All that's left to say is, Disney, do something. Quick! Number 3. Wonder Park. Funnily enough, at first, I was kind of with this movie at the beginning with the plot about the mother's illness, despite the tonal shift, but once June enters the park, when things take a huge nosedive. It then turns into another generic anime movie that's loud, obnoxious, and annoying. June, while I don't mind her eccentric personality, she kinda comes off selfish due to her mostly doing things herself rather than having the side characters help out. Speaking of them, the side characters don't really contribute much other than to tell jokes and be loud. And surprisingly, the movie is oddly mean-spirited and kinda depressing despite it being advertised as a fun little adventure. And while I admire the movie's message of using one's imagination, it's not executed well. And the movie's real message is basically a reverse Inside Out, telling kids to bottle up your emotions and being sad is a bad thing, which really isn't healthy or good for kids. While the animation, the voice acting, and the score is top notch for what it is, Wonder Park is just a movie devoid of wonder. Number 2. The Haunting of Sharon Tate. There's a reason why Deborah Tate considers this movie exploitative, because it certainly feels like it. This is a generic, boring supernatural horror that uses a real-life tragedy as a base. For starters, the acting for the most part is just fine, but I felt so sorry for Hilary Duff in this, having to do this horrible accent, which I'm sure the real Sharon Tate didn't even have. Well, at least she has Younger and even that Lizzie McGuire reboot sequel to back off on for her career. Not only that, the writing is about as cliched as any average bad horror movie with uninteresting characters and a couple of fake-out dream sequences. And then there's the ending, which definitely proves Deborah's point on how exploitative and even disgusting it was. It was a boring, stretched out, disrespectful mess. Maybe if it had different characters and not ones based on real people, maybe this would have been lower on the list, but since it does involve real people, it doesn't feel right. If you want a movie that features Sharon Tate, watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It gives more of a loving tribute to her more than this. And the number 1 worst movie of 2019 is Loquisha. Okay, this is the only time I'm going to talk about this movie. Afterwards, I am never to speak of it again, because quite honestly, it doesn't deserve any more attention. For those lucky enough that haven't heard of this movie, it's about an average down-on-his-luck white guy who impersonates a stereotypical black woman to get a job in radio. For starters, this movie is poorly made. It looks like an extended YouTube skit that somehow got a theatrical release, with obvious green screen, cheaply done effects, to even obviously done ADR. But the biggest problem is the elephant in the room, the premise. Now, I have no problem with shock humor or even a controversial premise. One of my favorite movies this year has something like that. And I do believe that Jeremy Seville has good intentions, even to being self-aware of himself or society about the inherent racism most people have inside. The problem is that it isn't explored. This movie glorifies, even embraces offensive black stereotypes, and it comes off more like lampshading. It's a bit hypocritical that he comes off guilty of the racism he's condoning. While I'm an advocate for giving movies a chance, this is what I'm saying you should ignore. It's best that we don't give it any more attention than it deserves. And those were my worst movies of 2019. Thank you all for watching, and I want to know, what are your worst movies of 2019? List them down in the comments below. I'm curious to hear everyone's thoughts. Stay tuned for my best of the year, cause that's going to be a lot more enjoyable. Thank you all for watching, and this is Clayton, signing out.